first in housing news.
Now, it is no longer news that the price of premium motor spirits, PMS, popularly known as petrol, has again gone through the roof, with the product selling at almost 1,000 naira per litre. This increase has affected every sector, particularly the housing sector, as property owners, landlords and tenants are struggling through these difficult times. This has been a topical issue on the lips of many Nigerians for a while now, and having this conversation with me today is an expert in the built environment, and together we'll be discussing the effect of fuel price hike on housing. I am Yumina Bagudu. Let's go on a quick break. The conversation begins after that.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts on Facebook, Housing TV Africa, on Twitter, Housing TV Africa, Instagram, Housing TV Africa. Join the conversation and keep up with latest housing updates.
Welcome back from that quick break. Joining me in the studio to have this conversation is Ustaz Abubakar Sadiq Mohammed, the CEO of Nilt Realty. You're highly welcome, sir.
Thank
Always
you
a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Same here. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me again.
You're welcome. So today we'll be looking at the current fuel price hike, which of course we all know it has affected all of the sectors. No sector is exempted. All of the sectors have been affected by this matter, and one of the major issues that we'll be looking at is the effect of cost of housing. Why? Because shelter is a fundamental right for every Nigerian. Shelter is important, and we advocate for affordable housing on a daily basis. But then with the current situation on the ground, with the current increase of fuel prices, of course, this has affected the sector. So generally, let's have your overview. For someone that is an expert in the built environment, what is your overview of the current fuel price hike on the cost of housing?
So, again, it's quite sad that we have to be having this conversation because we're at a time where one of the things we've been trying to drive home is this effort to really do and build as many affordable houses for the Nigerian populace as possible, because the huge housing deficit that we keep talking about is primarily within the sector of the mid and the low income houses. That's where you actually have the greater number of people who are unable to key into homes, either because of the cost, or maybe they don't have access to mortgage, or any other factor that is going to affect that. And in the past 1 year, the rising cost of commodities, the inflation, has constantly made that dream of achieving affordable housing become a mirage. It's now becoming, gradually it's growing, it's going out, because now I see there are more developers, maybe like myself, who are now trying to go more into the luxury housing unit or the luxury market, because they are unable to cope with the rising costs and unable to deliver affordable houses based on what the current realities of building materials is. And just when we thought there was going to be some level of succor with the announcement of the Dangote refinery coming on stream, Nigeria would be able to refine its own crude, thereby reducing drastically the cost of the products, the byproducts. So whether it's your diesel, AGO, or PMS, premium motor spirit, which we all know as petrol or fuel. These are the two main commodities, or the two main byproducts that are refined from our crude, and they help in transportation. Because aside from transportation, they also help in terms of the manufacturing of a lot of these goods. Because remember, due to the fact that we're still struggling with electricity, there's a huge dependence on fossil fuels to power the equipment or power the industries that produce a lot of the materials we need for real estate development. So because that was unfortunately thrown out of the window by the current imbroglio between Dangote Refinery, the NNPC, and as the news was made or the announcement came that finally Dangote Refinery, the very first production was now ready, we now unfortunately got the same news on the same day that fuel price had gone up. And trust me, it has thrown almost all of us into a very difficult position. Because if you had done your economic analysis before, you had prepared a bill of quantity, you are going to a project, or for some who had even already started a project, this rising cost has immediately taken a ripple effect into their own cost. Because now, if you maybe had budgeted for a project you wanted to deliver in 3 years, and you started this year, early this year, when at least you could maybe forecast that, okay, dollar was at this rate, or the economy was, sorry for mentioning dollar, because we're still heavily dependent on dollar, exactly. So if the dollar rate was this, or at least for even the local products that you are getting, you would look at cost of inflation being at certain level, so you could manage to do a forecast and say this is what it would take you to complete a project. From beginning of this year till date, prices have changed probably 4 to 5 times. And with this current increase, it has equally now impacted on whatever delivery. So a person who is building affordable houses, keeping a very low margin for, as their own revenue that they generate from this, will see that the margins are eroded. In fact, they'll probably have to be the ones putting in their own funds just to get the project to be delivered. And so what this has done is invariably the fuel price hike has again given another heavy dent to, in fact, it has taken away that dream of affordable housing, because many developers will struggle to continue in that. And those who would end up saying they will continue would end up just building very substandard homes that homeowners, once they buy and they move in, they spend millions just repairing and correcting, because there are plumbing issues, there are electrical issues, you have issues of improper screeding, so your walls are pulling off, you have molds coming in because there was no proper felting done, you don't have, you have all manners of dampness in your home. So there's so many challenges that could come because people might not generally go through or go about building or developing in a way that actually is looking more for sustainable homes. Now it's just for them to make a quick buck and get out of the project.
So are you saying that access to affordable housing in Nigeria is just a mirage and it can never come to reality based on what we are facing today in the economy?
Based on our current realities, sadly, yes. Based on our current realities.
How can this be remedied?
So definitely working with the right people in the sector to see how to bring down the cost of building materials. Because everything is factored to your cost of your building materials. It's also your cost of sale. If I can bring down my cost of materials significantly, and I can still give you the quality that you deserve. Because again, whenever we talk about affordable houses, I also try to focus on quality affordable houses.
Sure.
I don't want you to just say, oh, but I can build a house for 10 million in so and so place. But is it a quality house? You have to also look at what sort of blocks were used, what level of cement was used, on what degree, and iron rods.
Yeah.
All of those things you have to take into cognizance. And if you're buying from the same market that is qualitative enough, you know what the reality is to build what an affordable home will be at the moment. So the very first thing we have to do is to drive as much as possible the cost of building materials. And how do you do that? You boost the economy. You inject necessary finance. You have necessary policies that helps to promote the industrialists, those who are striving to at least develop systems that aids Nigerians and prevents us from going outside to import these same materials that we could easily have here. If we do not have such enabling environments for local business entrepreneurs and industrialists, then believe you me, we are only going to be doing ourselves an injustice at the end of the day, and we will only be focusing again on importation. Because if the likes of And I always go back to what Alhaji Aliko Dangote has achieved over his years. Every industry he has developed, one way or the other, has been to help Nigerians to promote some level of independence and economic stability. You might have your own thoughts about him as well. That's, on another thing. But if you look at the entire systems of works, from his cement to flour mills and all of that, and then most recently the refinery, if anything, the Nigerian government coming out to say we support this person in their drive, in their zeal, and we want them to achieve A, B, C, D, E, that gives the populace confidence. It gives the entrepreneurs confidence. But how does a man spend over 20 billion US dollars to build the biggest single train refinery in the world and the biggest refinery in Africa, and something that should be a source of pride to the nation, but instead we are seeing what we are seeing between the federal government and his establishment? This is not welcoming for many of us. And for so many who are even aspiring to be successful, probably not as successful as he is, but successful in their own sectors, this is something that has dampened the spirit and has made everyone to feel like, look, if we don't have a government that thinks of us, that protects us, or we don't have people out there within government who would protect the interest of the general Nigerian populace. Because remember, if this refinery works well, it is the entire Nigeria that would benefit. The entire nation would have access to premium products. I mean, when we saw his refined PMS looking like a bottle of water, right? And you look at the PMS you've been getting for so long. I have a vehicle of recent that we have to look at, changing it because we bought bad fuel that knocked the engine. So you have to start looking, and how many people out there have had to go through that because they had to use bad fuel that was not proper for the vehicle they were using, and it caused a lot of damages to the vehicle. Right? So we are definitely at a precipice of saying that if things are not done right, if we do not have the right people who understand the economics of the day to be in power and to support businesses, unfortunately, housing sector, and not just the housing sector, because every other sector will be affected,
Of course.
but the housing sector, which is the most critical, considering that you have a huge deficit in millions you are trying to cater to, that whole thought of affordable housing is basically being pushed away.
Okay, thank you so much for your overview. Now, let's look at local business in the country, because I know there's a positive side to every situation, and there's also a negative side. And for me, I feel one of the positive side for the current hike in prices for building materials to start off with is it will give our own people, the opportunity to manufacture made in Nigerian building material products in the country. And I had a conversation with someone, and the person told me that no matter how expensive or how cheap locally made in Nigerian building materials are, he will not go for them. He has his reasons, of course. He said, oh, Nigerians are really quality
assurance,
and
yes,
this
and control.
is building. So now, do you think that with this current increment in fuel price, it will give the Nigerian market, that's the locally made in Nigerian market for building materials, an avenue to to prosper and also give quality houses to Nigerians?
So not necessarily, because again, it's all a factor of the total aggregate you put together for manufacturing your goods. So if before, for example, the man who says, I'm going to produce affordable PVCs and I'll do them here locally, right? The cost he would have built in would include the cost of diesel, right, which he has to go and source in order to power his engine and all of that. If that has increased, that invariably would also affect the byproduct that he's going to be bringing out, which means he would equally be increasing his costs on production, and which is going to be and that's what he takes to the market as a selling price. So ultimately, these hike in costs would equally lead to a hike in the materials, which were meant to be affordable, were meant to be cheaper than what you would buy from outside the country. And no harm to the man who has said he would not buy anything from Nigeria, no matter how cheap it is or how affordable it is. Because what he is looking at is quality, right? He's not looking at, oh, the price alone. Because sometimes and I've always done this with a lot of people, it's very important that we shouldn't be penny wise and pounds foolish. You might go for an item and think, oh, this is cheaper. But then you end up paying such a huge cost in servicing or maintaining or replacing such device because the quality is not there. But then this item that is probably more expensive, because it's also a quality material, it takes you years before you need to change or service or maintain it. So when you do a full-on analysis on both materials, you find that even though this item is cheaper, in the long run, it becomes more expensive than the item which is here.
Sure.
So ultimately, all of these are factors that, naturally we have to take into consideration as developers in this country. There are those materials that I tell people, don't go and import. Nigeria can give you the same quality that you are desiring, right? And we've seen it. We've tested it. We've run this in our projects, some ongoing, some completed.
Okay, so that means as a developer, you advocate for made in Nigerian building, some made in Nigeria.
100. I even advocate for all products made in Nigeria.
Good.
That's the only way we can grow our economy. The truth is, if we do want this economy to be strong, to be good, to be at par with what we see in the international community, we have to promote and patronize made in Nigeria goods. It's not rocket science. But you can only produce what you have, what is quality. There's a saying that, how can you give what you don't have? So if you don't have a quality item to replace what is being brought in, then there's a problem. We're still a very heavily import-dependent nation, right? And I tell people that it seems it's very intentional. This making Nigeria very import-dependent. It's intentional because there are some people who are benefiting from that. They benefit heavily from Nigeria not being able to produce things as simple as toothpick. We have to import that. We have to import ABCDE. And I remember a joke I watched, and I talked about it even recently, of how a man said that if they explain Nigeria to you and you understand, if they've not explained it properly to you, that how can a nation that has crude and explores crude, it now exports the crude to get finished product. And now you now have a refinery that can give you the same finished product you are importing, but you are now fighting that same entity to now still want to continue importing because... So when someone explains these things, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that for 3 decades, all of our refineries in this nation have been undergoing turnaround maintenance that amounted to 30 or 40 billion US dollars. And the Dangote refinery was built 20 billion US dollars. And when we say 30, 40 billion, it's an accumulation of over 30 years, all the way to this time. So dollar at that time was better. But here is a man who in less than a decade built his own refinery with $20 billion. How do you even explain it? Right? And after building, give him the product. But here we have all manners of explanations being given that, oh, the crude had been sold or leveraged as a loan or collateral for us to secure loans. So it almost seems like there is an intentional effort to keep Nigeria where it is, dependent on international or dependent on products coming from outside the country, on international organizations and companies, making it look like Nigerians cannot be productive. Nigerians cannot produce the items we have. I was watching an interview again of 2 well-known Nigerians who manufacture cars. I don't want to mention their names now. But they were talking about how they are not being as patronized as they would have hoped because they are not the international renowned companies. Like, it's not like the Toyotas, the Mercedes-Benz. When they come in, they are giving all manners of... But meanwhile, these same cars do the same exact thing. The quality is there. You can see how advanced some of them are. But yet they are not giving that visibility.
And it's possible that it's even affordable than that of...
Trust me, it is affordable. I saw one of them, they are brand new, like when you say brand new, tier leather, was less than the Tokumbo pricing for a Corolla.
You can imagine.
At current rate.
You can imagine.
So I'm like, so you could buy a brand new at this, but then you have, again, it's all part of these factors that we have to work on. So advocate, yes, highly for Nigeria to become very dependent on its own development and manufacturing and industries. But we can't do this without the proper government intervention. We can't do this without having the right incentives in place, things that would help us know that once we get it done, government policies will not strangle.
Yeah.
They would instead support us to do well.
Yes, true.
And that's one of the biggest problems and challenges in every sector, and especially in the housing sector.
Thank you so much. So, people say that the government cannot do it alone. Of course, we are the government, we need to come together, to put our hands together and make sure that these things are, a bit lesser for us. And this brings me to my next question concerning, let me use the word, the landlords that we all know. Currently now, cost of prices cost of houses are on the rise. You see a one-bedroom apartment going for 850,000 naira, 900,000 naira, even 1 million naira. I've seen a self-contained with, just a room and not too big, a room, a toilet, and then a kitchen going for 1 million naira. And then the question that comes to mind is, how can people even, go for this rental? Not even your own personal property. So now, the question I always ask is it that these landlords, okay, we all understand that the prices of building materials are on the rise, but I always have to think back. I'm like, this property is yours, year in, year out.
Yes, it's an asset that
it's
belongs
an asset
to you.
that belongs to you. So why do you have to put so much money on it? Because even if you cannot get the whole money you spent in building that house, maybe let's say in a year, that if you have three units, let's just use a very small unit now, 3 units in a compound, and then you cannot get that whole amount of money that you use in building that house for that year. It's your asset, obviously, so you would keep getting. So what do you have to say about this? Is it that some landlords are taking advantage of the current situations in the country to inflate the prices of their houses?
Sadly, yes. Sadly, we are a nation of people who we would complain about an issue, but when we get into position to rectify, we even do worse.
Exactly.
Yes. So that's why I'm always very circumspect these days when I hear some people who are very vocal and they come out and they complain. Because the truth is, until you are given there's a saying that you don't know a man until you test him with 2 things. You test them with power, you test them with wealth. That's when you know the crux of a person, right? You know a man by how he responds and reacts when he has power and when he has wealth. So a lot of times when I see people go out and advocate, I have to also be patient enough to see, okay, in the next few months or years, when they are giving such position, what would they do? A lot of landlords today, as you've mentioned, they own the asset. And they see what is happening in the nation today. Cost of living has gone up. Cost of prices are crippling. In fact, they are strangling the average Nigerian. You have recently wages being increased by government after the NLC had fought for very long. In a swift moment, you had given and then you had taken more with the other hand. Because if you've given them 70,000 wages, you've now increased the cost of petrol or the cost of petroleum products. How do you expect them to afford that? Now to fill up a car tank is about 70,000 naira. So the minimum wage is enough for you to fill up your tank.
And then how do you feed your family?
How do you feed your family? How do you send your kids to school? Honestly, I feel so sad when I see, I think we are amongst those who we can say we are blessed, right? Blessed to have some work to do, blessed to have something to do. And a lot of times I tell people now, and especially in the times that I'm getting to and all, and my age, and maybe it's coming with age and also with interacting with people. But I'm not old. You don't think I'm like this 50-year-old, 60-year-old sage, no. But I think life has just gotten me to that point where I begin to look at what is priority in life. I begin to generally feel more empathy towards those who have not been blessed the way I have. And I see it as a blessing. I mean, I've had a family, I've had a home over my head, I have something I'm doing, a business I'm trying to run to cater to others. My greatest joy really is being able to cater to others, to provide affordable homes, good homes. I mean, I've had people who have moved into our projects and have mentioned all manners of things to us that sometimes they don't even believe such things still exist, right? And then my team, the level of dedication I see from them, I also am dedicated to them. But we have to have that empathy. And a lot of homeowners today who are landlords is to speak to their conscience, to tell them to have empathy. People are going through, Nigerians are going through one of the toughest times that they've ever gone through, ever, in the history of this nation. And, I mean, we've never protested hunger.
At all.
Never in Nigeria. A few weeks ago, people came out to protest about hunger. We've never had the level of insecurity that caused food prices to surge the way it has today. We're all seeing what is happening in the northeast with the recent flood, where even zoo animals are now on the streets because the flood was so much it took them out. Crocodiles and things like that. Not to talk less of the countless lives that have been lost. So in addition to heightened poverty, heightened insecurity, you now have the calamity of flood. And then to add to that, a homeowner that can help you to get shelter will now tell you that, oh, because of the increased pricing and increased cost and cost of living, I'm now also having to increase my rent. Unfortunately, we also live in a nation where there are no policies that regulate it, right? Real estate is not really regulated. Land ownership, home ownership, we are trying, right? I wouldn't say it's non-existent, but it's not as concerted as it should be. So what drives a lot of people in the industry today is their conscience. If you have someone that has a conscience to, feel the pains of others, he would not only not increase, he'll probably even reduce it. I've seen that before. In fact, I was shocked when it happened. During the era of COVID, why people were coming back, reviewing their prices up, the man came out and said, look, people have gone through a lot. There were no businesses. How will I increase my price? So he dropped his price for 2 years and allowed for those that were within his property to enjoy a relief for 2 years because they knew that they had gone through a COVID period. So there's a lot that we can do. There are many instances of real landlords who are like, they're almost like angels, like God sent. And many people who are fortunate get to interact with one. And if you have someone like that, hold on to them because they are like gold. Because the majority, unfortunately, are worse than the devil, right? Sorry for using that terminology, and I'm not saying this to undermine anyone, but that's the fact. You can't see people suffering, going through hardship, and then you are afflicting more hardship on them. And you want to take a justification of, oh, it's because the economy is A, B, C, D. If it's bad, make it easier for the person. The Almighty has mentioned that whoever makes life easy or shows mercy to others would also have mercy upon them, shown upon them. So,
thank you so much, Ustaz Abubakar. But we're going to go on a very short break, and then when we'll come back, we'll keep the conversation rolling. So viewers, will be back shortly.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts on Facebook, Housing TV Africa, on Twitter, Housing TV Africa, Instagram, Housing TV Africa. Join the conversation and keep up with latest housing updates.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is the program Inside the Real Estate and Housing TV Africa. Still in the studio having a conversation on the recent fuel price hike and the effect it has on the cost of housing. And Ustaz Abubakar Sadiq Mohammed, CEO Niels Realty, is with me, still in the studio having this conversation. So let's look at, you spoke about regulation in the real estate sector, which you said there's no regulation. Reason why so many things are happening in the sector, but then yes, the sector is giving it its best. What can you say really is the major issue concerning price regulation in the real estate sector?
I think it's a number of things, but the major one is interest, right? It's interest in terms of people whose interest is more geared towards a sort of capitalist kind of view of life, or capitalist kind of view of business. When I say capitalist here, is that they're focused more on profit generation, on building margins, which is not a bad thing. You want to be profitable in your business, but not to the detriment of the majority. So there's that whole position of I must make a lot of money, and regardless of who pays for what, money is my sole aim and vision. Typical example, we all know of the pronouncement by Boer sometime in the past that it had crashed its price of cement to about 3,000, trying to see how to bring the cost of cement down. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case because his cement was still being sold in the retail market for 7,000 plus. It was still being sold at the same price with every other cement that was in the market at the time. And I think I saw an interview where he came out to say they had to review and increase the price again and take it back to that normal price. Why? Because those who were buying from them at wholesale, because you wouldn't go to a Boer Cement to buy from them directly. You would buy from the wholesaler, right? Who is now buying from them, who he bought at wholesale to retail to you. And the reason they're doing that is because they are at least buying in bulk. If you're buying just 40, 50, 100 bags of cement, you can't go all the way to Boer Cement and they would engage with you. But if you're buying in huge quantities, maybe in trucks that have about 900 bags or so or more, you know, then they would have discussions, direct discussions with you, and you can truck out the number of cement you require for whatever project that you're doing. So you're going to the retailer, and the retailer who bought at wholesale 3,000 is still selling to you at 7,000. So they ultimately felt, look, we can't be selling at this price and then people are making such a margin from us, so we're going back to the market price. So they couldn't crash the price. Instead, they just made some people extremely wealthier. That is what is happening in our nation. People taking their own personal gains and interest above others. It's just like the subsidy scam that was happening and so many other scams that we've seen. People put themselves first before others. So the wealth they want to get is not really wealth, it's stealing. You know, I just take it as you've stolen money, you've unjustly enriched yourself. And, you know, there's this saying that we have in religious circles that anything you feed on that is unjustly earned would not be blessed. Your life will not be blessed, the life of your kids will not be blessed. And that's why you have a lot of cases today of people not doing so well. You know, you have wealth that was made at a certain point in time. After a period, it diminishes. The wealth is no more blessed. It's only blessed wealth that sees the means not being, it's not your end being justified by whatever means. It's that you are doing what you can to make sure the end is as good as the means that you're bringing on board. So your means and your end are all good. But if your means is, you know, something bad and you are saying, oh, my end is also going to be good, it's not possible. So a lot of times it's really about the interest. That's what makes it very difficult for bodies to regulate whether pricing, whether quality control and things like that. The only thing we can again hope for is to advocate for people's conscience, you know, that look, do the right thing, do it well, do it honorably, because you can't force anyone to do it. We're actually at a point in time in this country where unless it's the government that is driving the policy, individuals can hardly make any real significant change. And that's why government is still extremely important. When people say, yes, that government can do everything, I agree. But government must set the foundation. You must set the foundation by enacting policies that makes everybody adhere to it. Because if there is no foundation for it, then everybody will do as they wish. And a government or a system that allows everyone to do as they wish will ultimately crumble. Because if there's no structure, then there's going to be chaos.
So how can the government, you know, regulate prices in the market, especially for the housing sector?
So very quick steps. Number one, work with professional bodies. There are a number of professional bodies out there that have done phenomenal work in coming up with data-driven recommendations on how certain things can be done. I know entities like the NBS has done a lot of great work in looking at statistics within the country, and not just even in the housing sector, but in terms of every sector in the country. So that's one body or one entity that they should definitely work with. The NIA, the Koren, all of these associations that have well-grounded and experienced administrators and people with all of that experience, they can bring it to the table to help the government come up with the necessary policies that sets this regulatory body or sets this regulatory tone for these sort of items that are required. So definitely that's one aspect to go. Second is government can equally also do its own market survey intelligence. I mean, there are bodies, there are units that exist within certain government parastatals that can go out there to do the necessary analysis and market intelligence that helps them to say, okay, in addition to what these bodies are doing, we are also adding our own or complementing with our own efforts through this. The third is to have people that have the will to push for these things to be enacted, because again, if there's no willpower, everything dies. And again, it's driven down to, again, interest. So the willpower has to be there to drive those initiatives and make sure that they are actually implementable. And working with experts in the housing sector on a general note, looking at events, for example, like and not just because I'm on the show, the Africa International Housing Show, which has been, a very remarkable platform for bringing people from diverse backgrounds to have these conversations and see how to draft a way forward. I think it's very important that government does that, and I think government at this last housing show, where we saw people from diaspora, we saw international organizations from the UK, and it was also in collaboration and conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Housing. I think that was a remarkable thing. It shows that there is momentum being gained in that discourse, and hopefully by next year we should be seeing the federal government itself being involved in this effort as well.
Thank you so much for that kind word. So before we wrap up today's program, as a developer, kindly speak to your people out there. They should have some empathy. They should think of the current day situation that we're facing in the country. We're all in it together. We don't have some people by the side enjoying a different economy, and no, we're all in it together. So what candid advice do you have for them?
So my candid advice to my colleagues in this industry, and this is something that affects even me on a personal level, so I can share with you. I know it has been tough. I know we've gone through some of the most harrowing of experiences of recent, in terms of you planning and then you seeing the reality following that plan. And in some cases, you even end up losing funds, even on the projects that you might be on. So I candidly or sincerely, say to us all that let's look at the greater good. Let's not give up. Let's not lose steam. It can be depressing. It can be disheartening. Some days you can even almost feel like you want to throw in the towel and give up. And I know that there are so many of those sort of days that exist. But remember that there are many who depend on you, not just the homeowners you are hoping to deliver, but those who are involved in the process of delivering such homes. You are no longer to see yourself as just an ordinary person, but you are actually someone doing something very super ordinary in a time where there's so much difficulty and chaos. So I urge you to continue to keep the fire burning, to have as much empathy as you can, to be subtle in your approach to things and to life in general. Make decisions based on your analysis, but also put your trust in the Almighty and consult with the right professionals so that they can help and guide and ensure that you come out of whatever engagements you go into or projects you go into successful. And ultimately, remember that we are doing something for the benefit of humanity, the benefit of Nigerians, because the more Nigerians we can help to own homes, the more we can actually build families that could have some comfort of having shelter over their heads, as affordable as they can, relatively secure. So thank you all, and my prayers and blessings, or my prayers are with you all, and we pray for the blessings of the Almighty on our endeavors. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ustaz Abubakar Siddiq Mohammed, for being on the program today. It was a very delightful one and a very interactive session. We hope to have you again on another episode.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, viewer, for watching today's program of Inside the Real Estate and Housing TV Africa. You can watch this episode and subsequent episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Housing TV Africa. You can also follow Housing TV Africa on all social media platforms. And do not forget to download the Housing TV mobile app on Google Play Store and Apple Store to stay connected and get all the latest gist and information around the housing sector. I'm Yamina Babudu. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Housing TV Africa, your first in housing news.